Whee! That's a door. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. I'm actually cutting back the foxgloves. Foxgloves are biennials. They've done their stuff, so in theory, that's it, they're over. And the seeds will create new plants that will germinate this autumn and either flower next year, or if it's a slow year, even the year after that. But they can behave as perennials, short-lived ones. So if you cut them back, if you see signs of growth at the base, there is a chance that they will flower again next spring. And so it's a good idea at this time of year to create spaces, take stock, cut back where necessary, and then start to look around. Look at other gardens, look at pictures, make lists, and the plants can be bought, planted in winter, and next year this area should be full of colour that will sustain right through into autumn. Come on, Nelly. This week, Frances Tophill continues her vegetable trials at RHS Rosemore, and the news is mixed.
Now, you may want to sit down because I'm afraid I have some bad news. All of our tomatoes have got blight.
And we join Alan Power at Hestercombe, that great Edwardian garden in Somerset, to discover the missing plant that finally completes the restoration jigsaw.
It's just a real privilege, really. It's why you choose to work in a historic garden. The planting, the history is all such a big part of it.
And I shall be harvesting late summer veg and also preparing the vegetable garden for next spring and summer. And after last summer's disaster with my grapes, what with wasps and blackbirds, this year I've taken steps to foil them. Haven't we, Nige? Yeah. It is time to prune the summer fruiting raspberries. Of course, raspberries come in two types. You have the summer fruiting and autumn fruiting. And the big difference is that summer fruiting ones, which are here, produce their fruit on last year's canes, whereas autumn fruiting ones, which are in the next row over there, produce their fruit on this year's canes. And the net effect of that, in terms of pruning, means that you have to carefully prune out the old canes from summer and leave the new ones. And here, for example, is a new cane, hasn't borne any fruit this year, but will next year, whereas autumn fruiting ones, you can simply cut the whole lot flush to the ground around about Christmas time and let it start all over again. Now, I like pruning raspberries because there's an element of skill involved. And when you're done, you take this rather sad, tangled mess, and it looks really good. First thing to do is to cut off all the ties that held last year's canes. And you can see in the tangle of growth, there are wires in there supporting it. So if we cut those free, so just, there we go. Come on. Of course, the sad truth is, I realise I need glasses for this. This is the first time I've needed glasses to prune raspberries. I don't know if that's a sad thing or a joyous new experience, but it's reality. Well, that's last year's canes cut free. So now I need to remove them. And they all need to go and come off at ground level. And if you're not quite sure which is last year's cane and which is this one, the best guide, particularly this time of year, is colour. This is one of last year's canes, and you can see it's brown. And they will all be this distinct brown colour, whereas the new canes, like this one, are still green. And if you do the job this month, or certainly over the next 4 weeks, that's the best and easiest way to differentiate between the shoots. If you leave it into October or November, they all look a bit brown, and it can be a little bit confusing. So it's a job to do, I think, before the end of September. So I'm going to remove all these. I can come out there. So. Now what you're left with is everything that could potentially bear fruit next year. But at this point, you want to be selective because you don't want more than 4 or 5 canes per plant. You want lots of energy, so you want to A, select the best plants, and B, remove any that are inappropriate or tangled or broken. Now, the first thing to do is take any on the outside edge, so those can come off, and those along there, and that. And if I just go around this side here and thin these off, so that can come off there, and that. What you're left with are potential candidates. Let's start tying those in. And the system I use is to weave a long piece of twine. So what you do is you go around like that, around over, and then on. Now the next one, that's going to go over, so this one's coming on this side. I'm making sure that these are spaced out fairly evenly. Now I'll just tie the bottom layer in, so it's really fixed and firm. That's the beginning, and it gives you an idea of what they will look like when I've finished. So just a simple single row of clearly spaced canes, not more than 5 or 6 per plant. And that's it. They're then set up till next summer. You don't have to do anything else at all to them except for giving them mulch next spring. Raspberries are something that always take me back to my childhood, because one of my jobs as a small child was to go and pick a bowl of raspberries from the fruit cage. And I know that that fruit cage had been there since the garden was made in the 1880s. And so probably my grandfather, who was brought up there, picked the same fruit from the same canes. And a garden that is contemporary with that is Hestercombe in Somerset. It's one of my favourite gardens. The garden has been beautifully restored, but there was one plant that tantalisingly they couldn't find anywhere. And Alan Power has been down to find out more about this elusive gladioli.
Hestercombe House is one of the best places in the country to see the great teamwork between garden designer Edwin Lutyens and plantswoman Gertrude Jekyll. Her clever use of colour and texture here shows exactly why she became so celebrated. The Edwardian garden was laid out in 1905 to Lutyens' design. He gave Jekyll the drawings and an idea of the soil and location, and she came up with the planting plan. And thanks to Jekyll's planting lists, which are still here at Hestercombe, the garden team have been able to pretty accurately recreate the original design. But frustratingly, there's always been one plant missing. I'm meeting the head gardener, Claire Greenslade. So Claire, all of these plants, are these the plants that Jekyll planned and recommended for the kind of beds and borders at Hestercombe?
Yeah, we're lucky enough to have found all the original planting plans, because we think Jekyll did it all remotely, because I don't think she ever actually visited here.
And did you have to do a lot of research to try and discover what Jekyll used here?
We're really lucky in that the Portman family that lived here had a great photo collection that they've given to us. And
It's so useful, isn't it?
Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
So quite often I'm with the archivist with a magnifying glass going, what do you think that is? Do you think that's phlox, or do you think that's dianthus? And
it pops into your head at night thinking, actually, it could be
Yeah.
you know, X, Y, or Z, couldn't it?
it's always the way, isn't
Yeah.
it? It's always the middle of the night.
Did you face many other kind of challenges as you were, so to speak, plant hunting for the beds here?
Yeah, we had these two difficulties in that there are two types of gladioli that Gertrude Jekyll had mentioned in her plans,
Yeah.
Brenchleensis and Childsii, that just as far as we were concerned just simply didn't exist. We just couldn't find them anywhere. We presumed they'd just gone out of cultivation for, you know, whatever reason, maybe weren't good propagators or just weren't fashionable. And so we spent a lot of time sort of trying to grow alternatives.
Yeah.
So we would look at a black and white photo and a written description, and then we'd grow as many, you know, red gladiolas with a white throat as we could and try and compare them.
Wow. In essence, you're painting a picture from the past and you're adding colour to it.
Yeah.
And how close are you to getting your treasured gladioli back into the garden again?
Well, quite recently we've discovered that Brenchleensis still survives.
Really?
Yeah.
And when was that discovered?
A few years ago, a Jekyll expert, Michael Tooley, was visiting the Isle of Man and giving a talk there about Jekyll, and he mentioned Gladioli Brenchleensis. And after his talk, someone in the audience came up to him and said, well, I think I've got that in my garden.
Oh, how exciting. He must have nearly fallen off his stool when he heard that, yeah.
So he went and had a look and got experts to verify that it was the correct one. And we've managed to work with some gladioli growers and with the National Trust Plant Conservation Centre to try and get this corm going again so that we can actually have a stack of them.
God, that's amazing, isn't it? And that's not a process that happens kind of overnight, is it?
No, it takes ages because gladiolis will produce cormlets, like tiny little corms, and to get one of those to a flowering stage will take sort of 5 or 6 years. We have our first 10 corms that we've reproduced, and they're in pots and they're safe in the greenhouse. So I need 800, we've got
So you have
10. Yeah, it's a start, we'll get there. It's going to be a slow process, but it's quite a nice feeling to be conserving something that might have otherwise just, you know, if that guy's house had been sold and someone didn't like gladiolis, so they'd have dug them out and got rid of them. And
It's quite a moment in history, you know, completing Jekyll's kind of colours in your garden.
Yeah, and hopefully conserving this plant that might otherwise have been lost.
Yeah. So can we go and have a look at it?
Yeah, sure, they're up in the greenhouse.
Brilliant, thanks. Wow, how exciting, isn't it?
These were planted around about the beginning of May. I've just got them in a really loose compost. I was terrified of them rotting or getting eaten by mice.
But how special, you know, it's a really really significant moment. So you're presumably quite anxious now that all of this work that's gone in, that these flowers are going to come out and they're going to be exactly what you want.
Like, imagine if they came out yellow, or, you know.
I could just see a hint of
bit
red,
of
so we're going in the right direction. How on earth are you going to get from these 10 to the 800 that you need?
It's a long way to go, isn't it?
Isn't it?
We don't really have enough room or enough staff to sort of carry out that kind of mass scale propagation. So we'd love to start projects with our members and things like that to get them growing them and make sure we don't lose this species again.
You must be delighted, excited and a nervous wreck all at the same time.
Yeah, desperate to share it, desperate for it to flower. It's just a real privilege, really. It's kind of like why you choose to work in a historic garden as well. It's the planting, the history is all such a big part of it.
This is your stamp on Hesticum, isn't it? Getting this plant back. You know,
I guess so, yeah.
In history, you know, it will be mentioned in a diary and in an archive, and, oh yeah, Claire did that.
Well, it's something to be proud of, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it really is. A few days after I visited Hesticum, Jekyll's Los Brentulliensis bloomed in the garden for the first time in decades. What a beauty.
Well, I don't need much of an excuse to go back to Hesticum, and I'd love to see that gladioli growing in the garden. Now, one thing I didn't see on my last trip to Hesticum was any veg. And veg is something that I always feel every garden should have something of, if it possibly can. In fact, I've enlarged the vegetable garden here at Longmeadow this spring, and it's done well. The cabbages have been good. They're looking a bit ravaged now, but that's to be expected. These are summer cabbage, and the pigeons and the slugs have had a good feast of them, just as have we. So I will take this here before the nasties can get it. That's still really good. Next to it, I've got growing Savoys, which of course are winter cabbage, and these won't get harvested till the new year or even into next spring. And that's true also of the purple sprouting broccoli that I've got here. And you can see that I've underplanted it with two types of lettuce. I've got green and red oak leaf lettuce, which will grow perfectly well alongside the purple sprouting broccoli, and then as autumn comes and it goes, the broccoli can take over the whole space. Again, that won't be harvested till next April even. In this part of the garden, the old vegetable garden, I suppose you could call it, things have been going fine. One of my favourite brassicas is this. This is Cavolo Nero. You can eat it in summer, winter, spring and autumn, and it will grow quite happily for about 10 months. And you just pick the leaves as they develop, and it will go on up, and by the end of the season, it's right up here. And its great characteristic is that you can cook it for as long as you like, and it doesn't spoil. It's fabulous as a vegetable in its own right. It's great in soups, in stews. It makes a wonderful pasta sauce. It really is fantastic to eat. And on top of that, if that wasn't reason enough to grow it, it's really good for you too. Now, I grow vegetables because I like the taste. And I don't try and experiment too much outside things that I know myself and my family are going to enjoy. But Francis Tophill has been part of some experiments and trials that the RHS have been doing at Harlowcar in Yorkshire and in Rosemoor in Devon, comparing the two different locations with same varieties. And we join her in Devon as she looks at this year's corn on the cob.
Well, the cucumbers, beans, sweet corns and tomatoes have been growing all summer long. And these sweet corn look pretty impressive. The small ones that were tiny before Moray Picnic have now overtaken the others. But all of the sweet corn are showing signs that some of the cobs are ready to be harvested. Now you can tell initially from this brown rather than white hair coming out the top. But really, to make absolutely sure, if we peel back to reveal some of the corns and just squeeze that. If it comes out clear, then you know it's not quite ready. And if it comes out a sort of milky colour, then you know it is ready. And that one's actually still a little bit clear, so I'm not going to harvest it just yet. But when we do find some that are, that one looks good. Let's see. It's much more yellow. Yeah, that one's good. Now to pick these, take it with all the leaves still on the sheath and just twist. Comes off easy peasy. Into the basket. Hopefully one of many, that is. There's not much to do at this time of year with the sweet corn, but remember that they're shallow rooted, so they'll need lots of water, and take extra care when you're hoeing. Up in Yorkshire at RHS Harlowcar, they're mirroring our trials. They're keeping a record of all of their veg, and they're going to bring the results down in a month's time with some crops, so we can compare them for yield and for taste. Although we're harvesting, our cucumber plants still need a bit of attention. Remove any dead leaves and any rotten fruit to prevent the build-up of diseases. Keep watering and feeding regularly with a high potash feed. And most importantly, keep harvesting. If you pick the bigger fruits, it gives the small ones a chance to grow. These climbing French beans are romping away. This one is violet podded, and although it looks very vigorous, and there are some flowers, I can hardly see any pods at all. A few here, but certainly much too small to harvest, so I'll leave them for now. The cobra, on the other hand, which is this one, an old garden favourite, very popular variety, has loads of pods on. The only thing you really have to do is just keep picking and picking, because the more you pick, the more beans will grow. Up at Harlow Carr in Yorkshire, they're very much the same as us down here in Devon. We've all been harvesting for about 2 weeks, and as here, the violet podded are a bit behind the other two varieties. So, funnily enough, beans don't seem to mind the north or south divide. Interesting. All through the harvest, we're going to be keeping track and recording meticulously everything that we pick. So we're weighing the beans and the tomatoes and counting the cucumbers and the sweet corns. Now, you may want to sit down, because I'm afraid I have some bad news. All of our tomatoes have got blight, the dreaded blight. Now, this is an airborne pathogen which affects the leaves and the stems, and you can see it instantly when you get it, because you'll see these leaves begin to go and the stems will turn brown. In bad cases, you'll see like this. The fruits will also turn brown or black. Now, once these leaves have died, the spores will be released, and then they'll blow across to your neighbours' gardens and neighbouring allotments, so these have to go, which means that I won't be able to harvest them for tasting later on in the season. So instead, I'm going to taste them all now and just hope that Harlow Carrs haven't got blight. If you haven't got blight, now is the time to keep regularly watering. Irregular watering can cause the fruits to split as they swell and then contract. You don't have to worry when you're eating things that have got blight. It doesn't affect humans, it just affects the plants, so they're perfectly safe. I'll harvest all of these and then get rid of what's left. So, Tumbling Tom Yellow. It's quite sharp, but very flavoursome. This is Hundreds and Thousands, very small. Much sweeter. And finally, this is Tumbler. Interesting, really different texture, much softer texture. But I think actually the best one is probably the Hundreds and Thousands. It's really, even though it's small, it's really, really flavoursome. Hopefully you've been growing along with us, and we'd love to know how you've been getting on. So please put any pictures you can on our Facebook page.
Blight is a real problem for outdoor tomatoes. That's why I don't grow them outside here at Longmeadow. I did last year, and sure enough, they got blight. This year, in the greenhouse, not a touch of it. The glass is usually protection enough to stop the spores getting onto the plants. Well, certainly no problems with the beetroot. Sorry, no, I didn't mean to bash you on the nose. I'm sorry, old chap. And I like beetroot in lots of different ways, but not just for eating as a veg. They make fantastic juicing, and if you get a larger one like that, or even a bit woody later on in the season, don't ditch them. They're still really good for juicing. Fennel has had a mixed time of it in the last week or two, and it was really dry, and it didn't get watered, and it's bolted. Now, what you're looking for is one like that. That is a nice head. You can see it's good, fleshy, overlapping leaves. That will be delicious, either eaten raw as part of a salad or cooked. Lightly poached, a little bit of white wine is absolutely lovely. But when they get like that, there's no way back. That isn't going to ever develop a nice base that you want to eat. And so really the thing to do is to cut your losses, accept that it hasn't worked, and these very often do bolt if they're too dry, too cold, too hot or too wet, and use the ground for something else. Growing fennel may not be something that you indulge in, but you've got a bank holiday weekend coming up. So extra time to do extra jobs in the garden. And here are some of them.
If you've got a spare patch of ground in your veg plot, fill it with the seeds of a fast-growing salad crop, which you can harvest in autumn. I'm sowing rocket where I pulled up fennel that had bolted. I'm broadcasting it, so I don't have to worry about sowing it in rows. Rake the seeds in and make sure they don't dry out, so water them at least once a week. Now is the time to prepare strawberries for next year. Clear away any mulch that you put down, weed them, and then cut away all this year's foliage. And this will let light and air in so that new foliage can grow before winter. If you've taken cuttings in midsummer, as I did with these penstemons in July, now's the time to pot them on. Carefully separate the cuttings, making sure you get plenty of root on each plant. Pot them up individually with a good free-draining compost, water them well, and put them somewhere protected where they can spend the winter.
Come on now. It was this time last year when my grapes that I'd grown so carefully and was so proud of were brutally ravished by, first of all, blackbirds, and then, when they had taken all they could eat, by a swarm of hungry wasps. Hardly a single grape was left. This year, so far, I've kept both at bay by virtue of partly this screen, and inside, if you were a wasp, you would come in here, have a look at this, and stop dead in your tracks and back away gingerly, because to a wasp, this looks exactly like a colossal great wasp nest, probably inhabited by colossal great wasps, certainly bigger and fiercer and nastier than you, which means you stay away. You're on someone else's territory. Now, so far, it's worked, but it may be that the wasp season hasn't really kicked in, but that's the theory. You just hang it up, and it keeps wasps away. Now, you can see that the grapes have not yet been touched by birds or wasps. They are ripening really nicely. And in terms of thinning, the other day I was sent this. I wasn't quite sure if it was for clipping nasal hair or for thinning grapes, but I'm assuming it's the latter. So you get in there like that, and you just cut off a grape or two, giving the others that are left the chance to swell, because we want them to be big and juicy, not small and juicy. And I think they're going to be ready to eat very soon indeed. What are beginning to be ready to eat are these chilies. It's a good idea, as chilies ripen, to harvest them. Just cut them off with a decent stem. And when they're ready like that, they're delicious, eaten fresh rather than dried. They're fruity as well as hot. And you only get the best flavour when they fully ripen. Tomatoes, doing fine. These are a big beefsteak variety. And you can see that I can clip these, or there's one at the back there. That's a whopper. These are a variety called Brandywine, and the smaller but deeply fruited one is Consoluto Fiorentino. Really, really good, delicious beefsteak tomatoes, both of them. And good flavour this year, much better than last year. At the moment, peppers, grapes, tomatoes, untouched by the hideous hordes of either wasp or blackbird. Well, it's this time of the programme when we say goodbye. That's it for today. But I'll be back here at Longmeadow for a whole hour next week. So join me then. Bye-bye.